Welcome to the Animal Agenda. I'm Tom Kiesche, along with host Melody King. Our guest this week is Sabine Bradley Phillips, the Executive Director of the Reptile and Amphibian Rescue Network. That is also known as RARN, R-A-R-N, RARN. It's a mouthful. With a little digging, I found out that the Reptile and Amphibian Rescue Network was created to devote special attention to animals falling through the cracks. In the mid-1980s, was formally organized and began steering stray, abandoned, sick, and injured reptiles and amphibians into a network of volunteers. Their other mission involves educating the public about the best kind of reptiles and amphibians to keep as companions and how to keep them responsibly. From the RARN page on Adopt a Pet, it reads, as reptiles and amphibians become increasingly popular as pets, problems with caring for them escalate. Reptile imports in the U.S. now exceeds those of exotic birds and are only second to the vast numbers of imported ornamental fish. All right, let's find out more about all of this. Hello, Sabine.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. Is there anything I said that needs to be corrected or cleared up?
Yeah, most of the reptiles in the reptile trades nowadays are actually bred in captivity. A lot of the reptiles are falling into the list of animals that cannot be imported or only in very small numbers. So if you see the most ordinary pet reptiles, bearded dragons and so on, they are all bred in captivity. Australia does not allow the exportation of their fauna and flora at all since the 70s. So all the Australian-based species are all bred in captivity. So,
and bred over here, is that correct?
Yes, the original breeding stock was actually located in Germany, and I remember 25, 30 years ago when baby bearded dragons were sold for like $250, $300. And now at reptile shows you can get them for 20. So times have changed.
Wow. Okay, I want to hear more about volunteering at RARN, what it looks like or entails, how and where you educate the public, and where at RARN you get your animals. So which one you want to take first? How people volunteer at RARN?
Well, most volunteering is we need people sometimes to drive us to events or to the vet because I don't drive. The other question was, education.
Yep.
We sometimes do educational events in schools. We are every year at the Blessing of the Animals on Olvera Street on Easter Saturday, and we always have a table there. And that's pretty much it. Sometimes we want to reawaken we used to do once a month, do an event at our local Petco and put up a table there where we would educate people about the reptile keeping before they possibly buy one at Petco, for instance. So just to let them know what it takes, what it needs, what to look out for, that sort of thing.
So you go into schools and you also have tables outside of pet shops, correct?
The Petco event is actually in Petco.
Inside of a pet shop. Perfect.
Yes, so we used to do that regularly, and then because of the COVID, of course, we had to stop that. And so now we want to restart it, and so I will have to talk to the manager of Petco and see if they would be back open to do that.
The last part of that first question is, where do you get your animals from?
We get calls nearly every day. So they are either they were found sometimes in dumpsters. That has happened. Or they were found somewhere roaming on somebody's sidewalk. Sometimes people just simply cannot take care of them anymore because they are sick and they cannot afford a veterinarian. And they come from different. Sometimes we get transfers from shelters. So that has happened. So they come from various sources.
For the listeners, just so you know, we're doing this interview on Zoom, and I have a camera that I'm looking at, and I see a bird in the background, and I saw some sort of lizard run across a shelf. So can you describe what the rescue sort of looks like or it entails?
Well, we are small rescue, so the animals are in my personal home. I take care of them. I'm the main caretaker. And yeah, the birds, well, birds are descendants of dinosaurs, so they kind of belong here. They are two rescued pigeons that just live here. So, yeah, I have taken in all kinds of other animals over the years. I have fostered kittens. I have two rescue dogs. It's a zoo in here.
That leads me to the next question that I have. Is your rescue open to the public? And if someone's interested in meeting one of your animals, how should they go about doing that?
Just simply contact us via our website. You can call, you can text, you can email, and then we go from there.
And they can get those numbers from where?
We have a website at RARN.org. We also have a page on Facebook and Instagram at Reptile Rescue LA. You will find us there.
Excellent. So I'm just hitting some of the basic questions, and I have one more set of basic questions for you. I believe you have a German accent, so I'm guessing you're from Germany originally.
Yes, I'm from Berlin.
Berlin. So why reptiles and amphibians for you? What got you started, and do you have a formal education with this?
I have a little bit of education in human nursing, and I've always been interested in reptiles. I still remember when I saw my first wall lizards in Germany. I was so excited. Many, many years ago, I got my first iguana because I always wanted one. Then I took in a turtle that was sick, and then it just simply snowballed from there. And eventually I formally joined RARN to be able to financially support the rescue.
Awesome. You hit iguanas, turtles. I volunteer at a number of shelters. I should do my disclaimer that I'm speaking as an individual in my own individual capacity. But we see all sorts of things at the shelter. We've seen red ear sliders, iguanas, red bearded dragons, snakes, turtles, tortoises. What's the strangest animal or reptile amphibian that you've gotten a call for in Southern California?
The strangest. Right now, I have a Cuban tree frog that have become invasive in some areas, and he sometimes croaks, so you can hear him quacking in the background. I've had a California toad for many years. She was one of our animals that was very, like a signature animal for our rescue. She lived to nearly 20 years, which is a good age for a toad. So we've had, all sorts of animals here. Red-eared sliders, the problem with red-eared sliders is that they are bred in huge numbers, commercially bred. They are being imported. They are an American species. They come originally from the East Coast of the United States. But they are bred now in large numbers in China because for human consumption, but also to be re-imported for the pet trade. Now, there is a federal law that is called the 4-inch law that no turtle or tortoise can be commercially sold because of the risk of salmonella. It's a federal health law, but nobody enforces it. So people buy these little baby red-eared sliders on street corners or, wherever. And most of these baby turtles are actually sick and die within a few months. And that's when people call us because their baby turtle got sick. But if they do survive, they can grow big. A female red-eared sliders will grow to be the size of a dinner plate. And people don't know how to house them. So that's where the problem starts. And that's the most common call that we get. And resources to rescue those turtles is very limited because there's just so many of them. It's a big problem.
You're listening to The Animal Agenda. I'm Tom Kiesche, along with Melody King. And today we're talking with Sabine Bradley Phillips, the Executive Director of Reptile and Amphibian Rescue Network. Melody King, would you like to take over some questions?
Yes, thanks, Tom. Hi, Sabina. I have lots of questions for you. I have my own little animal rescue, and so one of the things I've learned having different people approach me is that reptiles are typically one of the most neglected types of animals, reptiles and amphibians.
Yes.
Is that due to a lack of education before people get them, or why do you suppose that is, that there is so much neglect in this space?
Yes, lack of education is definitely one issue. And the other is that reptiles typically don't make noises. So when they get sick, they just go into a corner and just sit there, and people assume, oh, it's still moving, so it's okay. And they can take a long time to die. They can be in this gray zone where they're not quite alive anymore, but they're not dead yet. That can take days, weeks, or months. And at some point, they will be beyond where you can save them because the internal organs have already shut down. And a lot of times people don't contact us until it is at that point, which means it's a lot of resources from our side of time and going to the vet and giving them medications. And then sometimes it still doesn't work out. Yes, it's a lot of times people will call me because they got a reptile for their kid, and then the kid lost interest in it, and the mother doesn't want to really deal with it, and then it just sits there in its cage and nobody really takes care of it. And yeah, the problem is impulse buy. When people just see, oh, it's so cute, and they see it at Petco or wherever, and they are not really aware. The people who work at Petco don't really know much about them. They don't really know. They're just there to sell products. And most people do not do their own research, which is so easy nowadays. You just put in care sheet for whatever the animal is. And, you just don't read just one website, you read several websites, especially if they are from like veterinarians or, like reputable sources. And you should be doing that before you get the animal to see, oh yeah, does that fit into my lifestyle? Is, in my apartment, is that something that I can do? And that should be done before, which goes for any animal. Whether you want a dog, cat, bird, or reptile, you should always inquire before you get it if that is the right animal for you.
Absolutely. And I know that reptiles often and amphibians often require a lot more setup, I would say, than some other animals. You get a cat, there's a few things you need, but you don't need a large tank and a heat lamp and all these extra things that I think when you're properly taking care of one of those reptiles or amphibians, you might need. So I think, preparing people for that cost. And one of the things I was curious about with the cost of these animals is veterinary care become as big of a problem with the prices as it has for those of us in the cat and dog world? And how hard is it to find a vet that will treat these animals?
Yeah, that is not every veterinarian who treats dogs or cats has got the extra education to treat exotics, meaning birds, reptiles, other exotics. And because it is an exotic animal, it is usually more expensive. So the initial exam is more expensive, and it is very important to do a proper research about the knowledge, because a lot of veterinarians will say, yeah, come on, bring it in, we are going to look at it, but they don't actually have the proper education. There is the exotics is only a very small part of the normal veterinary education. To be able to call themselves like a specialist, they have to actually take special education. I think it's another year of internship and so forth to learn, because A lot of things are very different in reptiles than in a dog or cat because they are cold-blooded, because they're reptiles. Some medications that you routinely would give a dog or cat, like dewormers, can be toxic for tortoises, for instance.
Sure.
There are some medications that you can give to lizards and snakes, but not tortoises and turtles. And even within turtles, there's some antibiotics that they cannot take, and it's complicated.
Yeah, they seem like very complex and complicated animals. And I think that is one of the things that a lot of people think, oh, this is an easy animal. It just sits in a cage all day. My first experience with an amphibian pet, well, I had some turtles when I was younger, but my college roommate of mine had a turtle and neglected it to the point that my other roommate and I had to have it put to sleep.
Yeah.
It was heartbreaking because, it's still a living creature. And so that's why I've always really wanted to support.
The number with aquatic turtles, it's the quality, the water quality. If you don't keep the water clean, they will get typically like things like infections of the shell. And most people are not aware that the shell is living tissue. It is bone covered in keratin. They feel, if you touch them on their shell, they feel it. If they get infections in their shell, it's painful. And so shell infections, skin infections, and septicemia, it's the number one cause of death for aquatic turtles.
Do you think these animals are things that people should have as pets? Do you think that these are animals that shouldn't be kept as pets and just left in the wild? I'm just curious on your personal stance on it.
Well, the problem is there is not much wild left. Many species are actually being kept alive in captivity. If you take, for instance, the whole Southeast Asian area, turtles are being wiped out there. It's a turtle massacre every day for traditional medicines, for turtle soup and whatnot. Many species of Asian turtles, especially, have assurance colonies in private hands. There's actually websites that are specifically there where you register every turtle, you register every breeding occasion, every hatchling, to form assurance colonies. And that goes for a lot of reptiles, actually. Many species are virtually extinct in the wild and they thrive in captivity, like Solomon Island skinks, many kinds of geckos. So to paint it with a broad brush is not helpful, I think. Just as we have a lot of neglect with dogs, cats, potbelly pigs, whatever.
Sure.
You have that in, with keeping any animal. And that the problem is education. That's I think what we need to focus on.
You're listening to The Animal Agenda. I'm Tom Kiesche along with Melody King. And today we're chatting with Sabine Bradley Phillips, the Executive Director of the Reptile and Amphibian Rescue Network. Sabine, I have a question for you. We get all these different types at the shelter, and as a volunteer, I don't know how to read them. I don't know what they need from me, but some volunteers believe they need enrichment. What does enrichment look like for a snake or a turtle or a gecko or an iguana? Can you get into that?
That would be mostly environmental. So it depends on what kind of animal it is. Like leopard geckos are very simple. They need something to hide in, maybe something to climb on. They're very simple. Snakes are usually solitary, so you should never keep them together with other snakes. And again, snakes are very simple in their requirements. That means they eat, and then they go to digest, which takes several days, and then they become active and they go hunting again for new food. So it's, again, it's environmental enrichment. You give them something to hide in, something to climb over, that sort of thing, water. Now, but when we come to something like green iguanas, monitor lizards, they are very intelligent animals. And their enrichment is really, they need something. Iguanas, for instance, are very visual. So they want something to look at, right? They need, my iguanas love to sit by the window and just look out and see what the birds are doing outside and stuff. I've had an iguana that actually enjoyed watching television. And he was very specific about what he wanted to watch, right? He also learned to recognize himself in the mirror, which tells you how intelligent these animals are. He would strut in front of the mirror and just sit there and look at himself and just, like sit there and like, oh man, look at me. So it was hilarious. So it depends on the kind of animal. So you cannot just say all reptiles are like this, because they're very different. Some reptiles are actually pretty social, like radiate slider turtles. They're quite social. And some are solitary. If you put them with another one, they will fight, So it is important that you look up each species and you look up their natural history. Where do they come from? What climate? What is the environment like where they come from? And then you go from there.
I feel like I need to ask the following question, because Florida has such a problem with iguanas and the Everglades has such a problem with snakes. There's been alligators caught in California where people just let them go in the wild. Can you address the dangers of what happens when you let an invasive species into habitat where it doesn't belong?
Well, I question whether the green iguanas actually came from pet iguanas. It is very possible that they actually got their rafting on tree limbs and stuff during hurricanes from Mexico. That's entirely possible. And the Burmese pythons have actually been genetically identified as having come from only very few sources. And many herpetologists say that the source was a well-known warehouse. Florida is one of the main import areas for wildlife and all sorts of other goods. And there are actually warehouses where exotic animals for the exotic pet trades, which includes zebras and kangaroos, are stored. And when these hurricanes occur, these warehouses, they are usually not very well structured. They're just simply blown apart. And so most of these Burmese pythons go back to Hurricane Andrew, to a specific warehouse, because their genetic marker shows them to be related. So it's not just people just letting them go nilly-willy. That's a fallacy. And here in California, it is against the law generally to release any kind of pet anywhere. So if you are being caught, you can actually get a big fine and even jail time.
If I could just interject here, as a person from Miami who was there during Hurricane Andrew, it was very much like what you're saying. There was a parrot explosion. There was we had monkeys running around the city. It was kind of a wild time. And one of the things that I still find amusing is that in Florida, they will do iguana alerts on the weather, because people will pick up an iguana they think is dead, put it in their car when the weather's cold, put it in their car. And then, while they're driving, you have all of a sudden a live angry iguana in the car with you. So
yes.
They will do iguana, which I think
so far I would like to see a real peer research study on the ecologic harm that green iguanas do, because they are folivores. They do not eat other animals. So the only issue is that people simply find them annoying. And the laws is people can shoot them, they can trap them, they can do all sorts of horrible things to them. And it will never eradicate them. That ship has sailed.
They're the coyotes of reptiles, it sounds like.
Yes, and Burmese pythons, the same thing. As you will never be able. And what annoys me is that, on the other hand, protected species like the eastern gopher tortoise can be bulldozed. Right? Developers can bulldoze tortoise burrows, as long as they set some other acre aside, supposedly for gopher tortoises somewhere else. So the whole thing is just, full with hypocrisy and cruelty. And it's not only green iguanas. Now they're going after tegus, and with they claim that tegus can eat your dog or cat. If you've ever seen an adult black and white tegu, they are so slow. They're just like lumbering along, right? There's no way that they would ever get a living cat. They are mostly carrion eaters at that point, so it's ridiculous.
I was curious, as people need to rehome their animals for whatever life reasons that they have, one of the things I always wonder, we generally know how to sort of screen people for homes for dogs and cats, but how do you know if you're going to rehome or adopt out to someone who is a good turtle or iguana parent or whatever type of pet parent they want to be? What are the things that you look for a good adoption candidate?
Well, number one, they always have to come here. I want to look them in the eyes. I want to meet them. I want to see who they are. If they contact us on Instagram or Facebook, I always go on their profile just to vibe out who they are. If they, for instance, sell animals on Facebook or Instagram, that would show up in the timeline. And I don't even bother wasting my time on people like that, because we've had people who would, for instance, insist on a particular animal. Is it really a female? Are you sure it's a female? When somebody asks that, I always say, he's probably wanting to breed it, so I'm not even going there, Or if somebody says, what have you got? I take whatever you've got. It's like, no, that's not how it works. So now for people who need to rehome, one of the things that I tell them to do is there are reptile groups on Facebook and Instagram. Several of them. If you go into the top of Facebook or Instagram, there's a search function, and you just put in reptile groups, and the well-maintained ones are the ones where you actually have to join, and they have to actually acknowledge you joining them. So that's the ones you want to go for, and then you create a posting, nice pictures, tell a little bit of the story of the animal. Take a little bit of an adoption fee. That's very important. You never want to make the animal free, because there's people out there who just suck them up for free or very little money so they can resell them, right? So you don't. That's not, And of course, you talk to people, and if one of the things, because we do not supply usually the tanks with them because we need the tanks here. So I always want to see a picture of their setup. I want to see, is it big enough? Does it have everything that they need? So that's important. And so people can do the same thing. It's just, just get to know the person. One of the things that you can do is make sure that you get updates. You want to write that down, right? Create, just text messages is enough. You need it to be written down, that you want regular updates, like once a month. You want to see a picture of it. You want to know that it's doing well. For us as a rescue, we reserve the right to take the animal back if it appears that it's not doing well, obviously. Or people cannot sell or give the animal away if for whatever reason they cannot keep it anymore. It needs to come back to us. So that's important.
Those are great tips.
So one of the city shelters recently had an alligator. It didn't sound like anybody really knew what to do with it. The U.S. Department of Fish and Wildlife was called, and they came to get it. What's illegal in a broad stroke in Southern California, and what do you do when you get an animal that's not legal in Southern California?
Well, all crocodilians are illegal in Southern California unless you are an establishment that has the proper permits for them. The same goes for instance, snapping turtles, either alligator or common snapping turtle, because they could, if released in the wild, they will literally eat everything and they get huge. One of the things that we do is we work with other groups and simply get them out of state as fast as possible. That's one of the things. Now, as a shelter, you cannot probably do that. So you would have to work with the zoo or other wildlife establishments to, I mean, if I can possibly help it, I avoid getting animals like that in the first place because it's nothing but trouble, so I try to find a way to get them out of state, away from me. I don't want to know about it. Because it's very illegal. So, we generally do not bother with these kinds of animals. We find ways, connections to just simply get them out.
There's a alligator at the LA Zoo named Reggie. And
yes, I remember Reggie. Yes, yeah. I remember Reggie.
They found him in like 2005 or 2005, and he's been there since.
Yeah.
I noticed something really funny on Nextdoor. There were for a while a bunch of posts where people were like, hey, there's a tortoise walking down the street. There's a tortoise walking down the street. And I learned apparently they go bury themselves and then wake up and just kind of wander off sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
And I was wondering, can these animals be microchipped? Is that a thing in your world? And
yes,
they can.
Yes, they can be microchipped. It's usually done in the skin by the hind leg. Yes, they can be microchipped. The problem is most people would probably not look for a microchip. So,
Right.
Now, when it comes to desert tortoises, they are supposed to have a sticker because they are a federally protected species. So you need a special permit for these. And the special permit comes with a little golden sticker that you affix to the animal. Sometimes they fall off though, so, But when it comes to like sulcata tortoises, they are pretty common pet tortoise. They can, if they get big enough, they will just bulldoze through most fences and just take off and roam around the countryside. So that's what they do.
I'm always amazed how many of those large tortoises that we see at shelters. And I always figured it's because they've just outlived their owners.
No, what happens is sulcata tortoises are good. They lay a lot of eggs, like 30 to 50 eggs. People breed them. I remember when baby sulcata tortoises were pretty expensive. And then people bred them and bred them and bred them because these baby tortoises, they're very, very cute. They're like the tennis ball size and they're really cute, but they grow big. They're the third largest tortoise species of the world. The males can grow to like 200 pounds and they can become aggressive towards people, ram you in the legs and stuff like that. And they will dig through drywalls. So keeping them secure outdoors, they will go through a chain link fence. They, draped over them. They don't care. They are like living bulldozers. That's how they survive in the wild. And they become simply too big for most people. That's the problem. Is they are not that expensive anymore. You can get a baby sulcata tortoise at the reptile shows for like $50, and it grows and it grows and it grows, and eventually you have this big living bulldozer in your yard. So what do you do?
What is your favorite, or what is the biggest misconception that people have about either reptiles or amphibians? Do you have one that makes you laugh every time you hear it?
Yes, that reptiles are stupid. They're not. It's actually, there's new behavioral research being done right now. It's a new field of research, and they are amazed at how complex reptilian behavior is. I personally love iguanas, green iguanas especially, and I would say that their intelligence is on the same level as birds. They know, like I said, I had an iguana who recognized himself in the mirror. It took a year. He had to, and he figured it out when he was actually on my shoulder and he was standing in front of the mirror and he was looking at my reflection and me. I remember that precisely. He was looking back and forth and back and forth. And from that point on, he knew what a mirror was. And he would come in on purpose and plunge himself in front of it and just put his jewel about and look at himself, and like he thought he was the greatest looking guy. It was hilarious. Which tells you how intelligent these animals are.
If someone were to get an amphibian or a reptile for their child because they believe that it's easy to maintain, what animal would you recommend, or what would you tell that person?
It depends on the age of the child, for starters, because all reptiles can carry salmonella, not only turtles. So the child must be old enough to always wash their hands after handling or touching the animal. And I would say under 6 years, I would not recommend any reptile at all. And beginner reptiles are something like leopard geckos. They're cute, they're small, they're soft, they're easy to take care of because they're nocturnal, so they don't need all the ultraviolet lights. The next one would be bearded dragons. They're very sociable. They like to cuddle. They like to sit on your shoulder. But they're a little bit more complicated to take care of because they need high heat, they need ultraviolet light. When it comes to snakes, I would go with something like a corn snake or a ball python, because their corn snakes are very mellow. They're easy to take care of. Ball pythons, because they're tropical, they need more warmth, but they're usually very mellow, easy to handle. So again, it also depends on the child. I mean, is it a very active child? Is it a child that is very hands-on? Amphibians, I would generally say, because they're just to look at, they cannot be handled. You should not touch an amphibian with your bare hands. It's not good for them. So I would say for children, I would not go with an amphibian at all.
What about the length of a lifespan? Because at the shelters, we see all these puppies coming back or older dogs coming back because people just can't make a lifetime commitment anymore.
Right.
What sort of age expectancy are some of these animals that you recommended?
Well, chameleons are very short-lived. They generally, even with the best care, the females live like 3 years and the males about 5 years. Leopard geckos can live well into their 20s.
Wow.
Green iguanas can live into their 20s if well cared for. Turtles and tortoises, well, that's something that you have forever, so radiate sliders live about 40 to 50 years. Box turtles, I have a box turtle. He's over 50 years old and he's still going strong. They can live to be 100. So again, it's something that you need to research and look into. It varies, but generally speaking, reptiles are pretty long-lived. Like ball pythons can live 18 to 20 years. Boa constrictors, about the same, around 20 years.
So just like your cat or your horse or your dog or your donkey, these are long-term commitments that involve the creature's life.
Yes.
I know that people have a tendency to just sort of release / dump animals out in the wild when they can't take care of them anymore, particularly animals like bunnies, and I assume animals like snakes and lizards as well. Aside from what we talked about for the environment, is that bad for the animal? Is there a way, if you took it to a wildlife rehab, can they rehabilitate the animal to become wild, or are these just domesticated animals that should only be kept in homes once they've been homed?
Well, most pet reptiles don't even come from this area. They are not endemic from here. They come from other continents, other countries, and they don't do well. We've had a couple of reptiles that were found in parks or something, and they all were emaciated and had mites on them, injuries on them. They don't do well, which is one of the reasons why it's generally illegal to release any captive animal, even if it is a native animal. If it has been for any length of time in captivity, you cannot just release it. Like my pigeons, they would not survive outside because they've always been here. They wouldn't even know what to do out there, So releasing any kind of pet is irresponsible.
Excellent.
I know you have to get back to your reptiles and all your creatures. Is there anything that you want to say, one last thing that you would like the podcast audience to hear from you or from reptiles as their voice?
Generally, before you think of getting any kind of reptile or animal into your house, into your family, read up on it before you get it.
There's so much overlap between dog rescuing and cat rescuing and reptile rescuing that you mentioned. And Melody and I have been nodding our head the whole time when you're saying certain things. We want to both thank you for coming on. Thanks for all you do for the animals. Again, what is the website and where can people find more information about RARN, R-A-R-N?
RARN.org, or simply Google Reptile Rescue Los Angeles, and you will find us because we also have an Instagram and a Facebook page.
I'm Tom Kiesche, and I've been with Melody King. You've been listening to The Animal Agenda. Our guest this week has been Sabine Bradley Phillips, the Executive Director of the Reptile and Amphibian Rescue Network. Special thanks to producer Marlena Bond. Thank you all for listening. Sabine, thank you for being here. And it's always a pleasure, Melody.